I'm Aliya. I'm in Nathan Fury's lab at the University of New Hampshire as well. And I'm going to be talking about common tern interactions with forage fishes in New Hampshire. So common terns are small colonially breeding seabirds, and they forage on small and juvenile fishes in our marine and estuarine environments. And their diet has been shown to be quite variable over time. And so this feature, along with some others that I won't get into, make them potentially useful as monitors or predictors of fish populations. But in order to really fully understand their utility in that way, we have to more fully understand their relationship with their prey environment. And so here in New Hampshire, we have the potential to use terns in this way. We have a breeding colony of common terns out on White and Seabee Islands on the Isles of Shoals that you heard about in the same system that Sydney's working in. And the 3,000 or so breeding pairs of common terns out there forage in the waters offshore around the colony, but they also venture into the Piscataqua River and into Great and Little Bays. And so researchers have been studying and monitoring this colony for upwards of 2 decades. And so through their work, so that's the Shoals Marine Lab's Tern Conservation Program, as well as through the MBOD project that you heard about, and my own PhD research, we're trying to understand how common terns respond to changes in their prey environment, specifically thinking about diet and movement of the seabirds, and how we might be able to leverage common terns to better understand our fish populations in New Hampshire. And so we've got multiple sources of data that we're using to try to understand this question, some that describe common terns and some that describe their prey environment. And so to understand the common tern diet, we're first using fecal DNA metabarcoding. This is similar to what we heard about with eDNA, except this time we're extracting DNA from feces. We also have observational data, and these happen both live on the tern colony as well as through video data, videos of terns feeding their chicks. To understand tern foraging movements, we've been deploying GPS tags on birds since 2019, and through the MBOD project, we'll continue doing that through 2025. And then we also have all sorts of historical population dynamics data and reproductive data. To describe the prey environment, we have eDNA. Not going to talk about it because we all heard from Allison. And we also have fish catch data, and this both comes from our own fishing effort that we do using a purse seine in the Piscataqua River and in the Little Bay. We've been doing that since 2021, and then we use historical fisheries monitoring data sets that again you heard about earlier in this block. And so I of course can't talk about everything, but I want to show you just a bit of what we've collected on the tern side of the question, specifically movement and feeding data. So, oh, that's an interesting, that's an interesting surprise. There would have been points on this map here if things had gone according to plan. And let me see if they made it to the next one. No, maybe not. Okay, well, I'm going to describe what you would be seeing. And we have data starting in 2019, and these zoomed out maps would have shown you the whole distribution of positional data that we have, whereas the map on the right is showing zoomed in locally to our area. And actually, maybe that's fitting because that's the area we're talking about anyway today. But we use some statistical models to try to identify which of these points might actually be associated with foraging. And basically what we found is that terns have a really broad foraging range. So if you could see the map, you would see that they actually venture all the way down to the Cape and even past the Cape at times. But they also frequently use the Piscataqua River and Great and Little Bays to forage. And so all of this stuff that we're talking about today is quite important to these terns that are about 7 miles offshore. And so what are they foraging on in these areas? Well, from observational data, we know that they like to eat a lot of herrings and hakes and sand lances, among a bunch of other species. And we also know that their diet can be quite variable over time. And so these are the kinds of things that we're trying to look into. And eventually we will start to piece those pieces of the puzzle together with all of the information that we're gathering about the prey environment. And we hope to be able to describe that relationship between common tern diet and movements and the prey environment, and hopefully be able to understand how we might use terns as monitors for fish populations. And yeah, I would like to thank all of the organizations that have supported and funded this research, as well as all the individuals that have made this possible over the past few years. Okay, Liz.
How choosy are terns in terms of like, if there's a fish there, are they gonna eat it, or do they have, a preference?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the big questions that we're trying to understand. They certainly appear to have, they have a preference for smaller juvenile fishes, and this makes sense based on their size, of course, and the size of their chicks. There has been some work that's shown that they will try to match the size of the fish that they're bringing in to how big their chick is in its developmental process, so we know that they do have some ability to pick and choose. But we also have other evidence that they're actually maybe not so great at picking and choosing. One good example of that would be butterfish. If you see the chick, the fish that's directly below it, which is really wide-bodied, they'll often bring in butterfish for their chicks, which are too wide-bodied for the chicks to swallow. So unclear, but yeah, trying to figure it out. We're hoping to pair that purse staining data, and the eDNA data and stuff with the diet data to see sort of what they're actually selecting from what's available to them. Drew, you had a question?
That was the exact question.
Oh. Yeah.
How deep did, sorry, that Turner, I have to go for how deep do they dive? Far down the water level?
About 1 meter. Yeah, so super surface level, so they're foraging on schools of forage fishes.
Last question.
Yeah.
Steve Jones, they're not trash feeders, are they? Like gulls?
No,
So,
no, not at all. They really do specialize on fish and they'll eat invertebrates. I've seen once one brought in a fishing lure, like one of the plasticky lures, but no, they're not trash eaters. Okay, thank you.